Howdy, folks. Welcome to episode 2 of Toony Talk. Today, we're going to be talking about the all-time classic, the Powerpuff Girls. Not to be confused with the 2016 series that was a reboot. The original, the OG Powerpuff Girls, which ran from 1998 to 2005. Very solid run. And, oh boy, I get a lot of nostalgia for this one. This show was... It was funny, it was actionable, it had heart. Now, I'm sort of breaking my own rules for Toonie Talks here. Usually I make these after I've gone through a series recently, but I haven't touched this one recently, aside from I think last year I watched a couple of episodes back, but it's still a lot of it is still fresh in my mind, and I've got the Wikipedia up here to remind me of what episodes are which, so I'm just gonna go through it to my memory. The basic premise of the show is simple. Professor Utonium is in his lab trying to create the perfect little girl, accidentally adds chemical X to the concoction, ends up creating three superpowered little girls who end up fighting crime and protecting Townsville from all sorts of monstrosities straight out of most Japanese kaiju films, and another host of gallery of wacky villains such as giant amoebas and a bunch of green guys and a monkey with a huge brain known as Mojo Jojo. I mean, it's just all sorts of wacky, but it's very grounded, and it feels very Japanese influenced, and I think that was the plan all along for it. And this show, when I say that a show is edgy, because I mentioned before that Cow and Chicken was edgy in the first episode of Toonie Talk, this show was edgy. I mean, there was blood in this show. I don't know how it got past the censors, but there was blood in the intro. It was violent, especially against the monsters they fought. I mean, it pushed boundaries in that sense. But all of the three girls had their own independent characters, despite the fact that they all pretty much look the same. You had Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup. My personal favorite's Buttercup. She has the edge, she has the sass, she has the kick butt attitude. She's great, and I like her green. Really, wish there was an orange one, but beggars can't be choosers. But I do like the other two sisters. I like Blossom and Bubbles. I think they're fine as characters. Bubbles gets a lot of really. She has a really good episode of character development where she goes from being a wimp to being a champ. Really, really solid. But yeah, this show throughout the duration of its run, even when in the second half of its run, it changed a lot of its animation style because they were going from Hanna-Barbera to Cartoon Network Studios. It really, and I mean really, still maintained its quality as far as I could tell. I mean, there were some episodes that I'm sure people look back on and are like, why? But this was a classic. It got an amazing movie. It's very synonymous with Dexter's Lab because I believe Craig McCracken worked on Dexter's Lab as well, and Gendy Tartakovsky did some stuff for Powerpuff Girls, so it was kind of a back and forth thing. I kind of tie these two shows in as sister series, even though I don't think they are in any official ways. It would have been interesting to see what a crossover would have looked like between the two. I think that would have been really neat, but that'll probably only happen if Dexter's Lab gets a reboot, and I really don't want that in modern age because the Powerpuff Girls got a reboot in 2016, and it's well, it's um. well, it exists, is all I can really say about that. It exists. The animation's okay, I guess. But none of the original voice actresses. Craig McCracken has next to nothing to do with it. Cartoon Network owns the Powerpuff Girls as a property, so they decided to just reboot it and do it their way. And one episode had twerking. So that's the difference in quality we're talking about here. We go from blood in the intro of the original to twerking. So, moving right along, this series premiered. There was a short called, well, I can't really say the name of what it was called. It was, yeah. But basically, it was the pilot episode was called "A Sticky Situation." It's instead of Chemical X, it had what the title was called. You're gonna have to look up what the title is because I don't want to say any of that on YouTube because I'll probably get into trouble. It's minor cursing, but I'm so weary of YouTube these days and their censorship. So, but it was originally a much edgier concept. It was a part of, I believe, What a Cartoon. They had two shorts for What a Cartoon in 1995 and 1996. So it was a part of that wonderful, glorious experiment that produced a lot of other shows. and it had 6 seasons, and it had at least 3 specials. One in 2003, and I don't remember when the other two were, but then there was another one in 2014. I remember they did one recently that was it very much leaned into what if Powerpuff Girls was an anime, because I think there is an anime in Japan, an official anime of Powerpuff Girls, which is really cool. This show is very anime inspired. They fought a lot of kaiju that were straight out of Godzilla. I mean, really awesomely designed kaiju, and they destroyed these things. They established that there's a monster island outside of Townsville that, and I forget exactly why they said the monsters end up in Townsville, but they do, and the Powerpuff Girls have to destroy them, and it gets gory. And when I mean gory, I mean even as a kid, my jaw has just hit the floor at some of the gore and the way the violence is. It's everything a little 8, 9, 10-year-old boy could ever ask for, is just superheroes kicking butt. And that's what it was. And the superheroes in this case had to be 3 little girls with weird eyes and different colors. So it was cool. It was iconic. It is one of the pillars of Cartoon Network. If they ever do a museum to Cartoon Network, there's going to be a room on Powerpuff Girls for sure, because it is a pinnacle. Even, I mean, the fact that they rebooted it, and I think the reboot might actually still be going, the 2016. No, it looks like it ended in 2017, thank goodness, because, no, unless you're going to get the original creator on board and continue what you started, don't do that. Yeah, the voice actresses are all still able to do their characters. It makes no sense. It makes no sense. Either they found the original too problematic, which I think was the case, and they wanted to do their version. I don't want your version of the thing. I just want more of that thing. I forget who I heard that coined by, but I can't take full credit from that. But that's exactly what it is. It's just it was just a bad decision, because this was such a tremendous show, and it got a really good movie. And I think in one of my commercial reaction videos, I react to some of the promos and talk about it a little bit there. I don't know if that's uploaded to Rumble yet or not, but it will be at some point, so keep an eye out for that. But the movie itself was tremendous. Usually TV spin-off movies kind of suck, but this was an origin movie. And no, this wasn't a TV movie. This was a theatrical release, if I remember correctly. I don't remember. Did I go to see it? It was I know it was a theatrical release. I know it was. Um, yeah, because it has a box office. Its budget was 11 million and it made 16.4, so it didn't do half bad. They definitely made back their budget. It wasn't groundbreaking, but I mean, my gosh. That's how big the show was, is it got a theatrical release for its movie. It wasn't just another television movie. And it was done so well. That was probably the best of Mojo Jojo as a true villain that we have seen throughout the series. He's done some truly villainous things, but it is the best of Mojo Jojo we've seen. How he's just a clever, cunning manipulator, and it's a very emotional movie. It really pulls at the heartstrings. And you're probably wondering, why am I talking about the movie? It's about the show. The movie definitely ties into the show because it's an origin of the characters and how they came to be. And it's a heartwarming origin. It's a very well-rounded, well-written origin. One of the best movies based on a TV series I think I've ever seen. I would highly recommend watching it. Watch it before the series, watch it after the series. I don't think it really matters. The way that it was released, I think, sometime during the, let's see. It was released during one of the seasons of the show. The poster looks awesome. Let's see. It premiered June 22nd, but the full release date was July 3rd, and July 3rd would have been, let's see what season that was. Let me double check that. 2002. So season 5 was 2003, so it was season 4. It was, yeah, it was season 4. So the show was already going strong. It had already had 3 strong seasons, and they're like, hey, let's make a movie. So I would say watch it till that point, and then try to match it up, or do whatever you want. You can watch it probably at any time, and you won't be, you might be a little lost for context, but I would say at least watch the first and second seasons at the very least, if not the first, because you need to know who some characters are, and I think the first season establishes them very well. Episodes that stood out to me. Oh boy, this is gonna be a circus. There were so many. There were so many. They had one in season one dealing with the boogeyman called Boogie Frights. It was episode 5. The description reads, Bubbles must face her fear of the boogeyman after he blocks out the sun and allows his monster friends to party all the time. It's a really cool episode because it delves into the character traits of all the girls. You see, how Buttercup has sort of a mean streak in her, and she's really getting into all the stuff that the Boogie Monster is doing. Like, he creates basically a party scene by blocking out the sun with a giant disco ball. And you see Bubbles being afraid but having to overcome her fear, and Blossom having to be a leader. That one stood out to my memory just because of the just the way it was done, the music. It was a whole lot of fun. There was the episode after this, not the one directly after it, but the one oh shoot, I lost my place. Yeah, episode 6A, Telephonies. The Gangrene Gang get a hold of the mayor's hotline to the Powerpuff Girls and makes prank calls, sending the girls in a wild goose chase all over town. However, when it's the notorious villains Mojo Jojo, Fuzzy, and him that the gang disturbs, they learn the price of making prank phone calls. It basically ends up with the Gangrene Gang, who are sort of the one of the dopier villains of the series. They're making all these prank calls. They make ones to the more serious villains, and the villains show up and just beat the crap out of them. And the series usually ends with Tom Kenny as the announcer going, "So once again the day is saved thanks to the Powerpuff Girls," or some variation thereof. And this time he goes, "So once again the day is saved thanks to Mojo Jojo, Fuzzy, and him." And I just remember that being the funniest thing, and the theme sort of slows down and gets warped. Like, what is going on? The theme of the comedy in this show is just so unique, but it's laugh out loud funny. Whenever the show does humor, it's laugh out loud funny, and it's very self aware. It's not what you'd expect based on just looking at even the image I have up. It's not what you'd expect at all. It is very comic booky, very Japanese-esque, very almost anime, but not in a bad way at all. It's just a lot of fun. And then there's the episode where uh, Mojo Jojo babysits the girls, which I can't remember if that's season 1 or 2. I know it's early season because I remember the animation. That's one I go back to frequently, because it's so funny. Oh, before I get to that, the episode 3B, Too Pooped to Puff, is actually a really good one. When Townsville begins taking? Why can't I read? When Townsville begins taking the Powerpuff Girls for granted over little things, the girls vow not to get involved until Townsville starts taking care of themselves. Therefore, when a monster attacks the girls decide to stay put on a cloud, trying to teach the townspeople how to beat the monster themselves. This is a really solid episode where you start to see what it would be like to have superheroes that take care of things all the time and take them for granted. Like the description says, they end up taking the people for granted, and then Powerpuff Girls basically just say, take care of it yourself, which you can tell they're kids because there's not a lot of wisdom in letting people who are basically defenseless against a giant monster take care of it. But the townspeople do end up defeating the monster in a very contrived way, and it turns out nobody actually really learns anything, so it's sort of a funny ending in that. They basically end with frowns on their face. It's a really funny episode. That one also stood out to me. Beat Your Greens, that was another really good one. That came after episode 3, episode 4A. Broccoli aliens land in Townsville with a plan to harvest all the Earth's vegetables, and the only way to beat the broccoli is to eat it. The girls are able to defeat their most detested side dish with the help from the other kids in town. Really cool sort of kids have the power episode. They have to overcome every kid's worst nightmare, which is eating their vegetables. I know I certainly didn't eat my vegetables. I mean, look at me. I I'm still trying to lose weight, but I mean, I detested vegetables. Greens in particular, green peas. Ugh. Green peas and green beans. To this day, I still have a horrible gag reflex just thinking about them. They just make me, ugh, they make me want to vomit. Broccoli is okay if you dress it up a little bit, and carrots are fine with some ranch, but greens are just disgusting. So I could definitely relate with this episode when it aired. I remember seeing it, and it definitely stood out because it was definitely a kids have the power episode. It's not just the Powerpuff Girls. All of the kids in Townsville have to come out and destroy these veggie monsters by eating them. They pour molten cheese on them, and it's just really really cool, really fun episode. But let me see if I can find the name and description of this episode about Mojo babysitting the girl. Mojo's babysitting the girls. Oh, well, there's another one in that same vein. Slumbering with the Enemy, season 2, episode 13. 13B, the Powerpuff Girls throw a slumber party and invite every girl in their school to come. Mojo Jojo steals the final invitation and comes to the party dressed up as Mohisha or Mojisha. When the girls catch on, Mojisha seems like she just wants to party, but he's really planning a ruse to get rid of. But is he really planning a ruse to get rid of them? They sort of do that as a question. That episode was pretty funny. I don't remember how it played out. I just remember it was funny how Mojo Jojo tried to be a little girl, and it was the most obvious disguise ever. It was just funny. Jeez, I can't find this one. I knew this might happen when I'm going through the list, but let us see. It might have been season 1. But a lot of these early season 1s were really funny. But once I get to it, I want to talk about that episode just a little bit because there's a couple interesting features about that, and I actually listened to some of the behind the scenes. It actually has a lot to do with The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, believe it or not. So, if I can find the title of this stupid thing to prove I didn't make this episode up, I know people who watched it know what I'm talking about. Let's see. It's got to be seasons 1 to 3. It certainly wasn't season 4. Um, Yes, okay, it's episode season 3 episode 2B called Child Fearing. When the professor runs late for an event, he quickly calls the mayor who then calls up for a babysitter for the girls. It turns out that the babysitter is actually Mojo Jojo who wants the girls to help him conquer Townsville, but they make it a hilarious challenge for him. One of the funniest episodes in the entire show. They drive Mojo insane. Turns out Mojo's a really good hibachi chef, but the funny thing is that when the professor is running late, he calls the mayor and the mayor is playing Ocarina of Time. And according to, I believe, Craig McCracken, who created it, the reason they did it that way was because at the time they were trying to write episodes, but Ocarina of Time had come out and everybody was playing it at the same time, so they would take breaks and go, okay, who is on this part of Ocarina and how can we get through it? And I think that is the hilarious thing, and it shows exactly the types of people who wrote this show. It's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal episode. It's a nice little homage to one of the greatest video games ever made. It really is very cool. That's the type of show this was. It had little nods to different things in culture. It was a lot of nerds who wrote this show, nerd pride and all that. But just a really fantastic show. I mean, I can go through any of these episodes and tell you they were funny if I remember them. There's a lot of them that kind of fade in between. I don't remember the stuff with the newer animation quite as much. Yeah, I don't remember much of like season 4 onward. That's the stuff I'd have to go back and rewatch to let you know. But I do remember it being good. It was different at times, but it was good. They also had, oh, I've got to talk about this one, although it might be controversial. In fact, I'm pretty sure that the creators disowned this episode, even though it was one of their best, because it did get political, but it got political in a way that I personally agree with. Um, let's see. It was an early season episode. I'm sorry I'm spending all of this time talking about these episodes or trying to find their names and things. I could have made a list early on, and I'm too stupid to do that apparently. Let's see. It was an episode centered around feminism. I forget the name of the villain. She was a one-off villain, but she was a feminist villain, and she got the girls roped up into feminism. I don't think it was quite third wave feminism at the time. It may have been sort of a radical classical feminism sort of thing. It could have been early third wave stuff, but obviously at the time, the creators didn't agree with that sort of thing, and they were pointing out the hypocrisy of feminism. Um, oh, I almost got it there. I thought one of those titles was it, but basically it started out with the girls being sympathetic for the villain because she kept making a case for her crime being okay because she was a woman in a very hypocritical way, and eventually it was up to Miss Keen, their teacher, and Miss Bellum, the mayor's assistant, who almost everybody loves, that it was up to them to set the girls straight and point out their hypocrisy. It was one of the best ways to handle a political issue. Um, let's see. Oh, I thought I almost found it there. Dang it. It couldn't have been past. It couldn't have been past season 3. Equal Fights. There it is. Season 3, episode 10B. It premiered in. Oh, I lost it. No. I'm such a professional, guys, aren't I know some people like seeing me screw up, so that's fine for them. Let me get back to it here. I just should have locked in on it scrolling, but yeah, it had a very edgy name too, Equal Fights. So it was season 3, episode 10B. The description reads as follows: a female villain and radical feminist named Femme Fatale, voiced by Grey Delisle. They don't say that, but I just find that a bit ironic given some of her politics of late. Convinces the girls to hate men so she can get away with crimes and steal all of the Susan B. Anthony dollars in the city. Miss Bellum and Miss Keen encourage the girls to protect everyone, including the men, and all other women reveal that Fatale doesn't follow her preaches. Doesn't follow her preaches? Who wrote this? I don't know. Maybe I can try to edit that. The girls soon teach Femme Fatale a harsh lesson for both her misandry and defamation of Susan B. Anthony for what she stood up for. It is a landmark episode in that sense, and I'm not a fan of doing political content. And I think the reason that they disowned this episode was because in the modern climate, the more progressive climate, I think Craig McCracken and Lauren Faust, who are husband and wife, I think they both... Lauren Faust wrote it, so I think she ended up disowning it because I think she probably agrees more with Femme Fatale now from the sounds of the way the industry is now. So, but as far as I know, they've disowned the episode. I don't know if that's 100% true. Don't quote me on it. But basically, it's a really balanced episode because it showed, and I'm sure this was a thing at the time, although I was young and I don't remember seeing a lot of it around, but it showed the hypocrisy in a lot of what you see with modern day feminism, and it's very, very timely to today because it basically shows the hypocrisy of wanting equality versus wanting superiority, and this villain, Femme Fatale, she just was using feminism as an excuse to do bad. And I remember in the episode when Keen and Bellum had the Powerpuff Girls, they had them in like this one of those detention chamber rooms, and they had it lit up, and they showed all of the women that she hurt. I remember thinking, wow, that is a good point. Even as a little kid, I was like, wow, that's what a hypocrite, you know? It was political, but it was to the point that if you're gonna believe something, you can't be a hypocrite about it. You know, you got to be straightforward about it. And ultimately, they weren't. Basically, it's an episode that I'm sure would be banned today. To be completely honest with you, in syndicate, if this was still in syndication, they wouldn't air this episode, or they'd have to put some sort of disclaimer in this episode saying they've disavowed their views on this. But this was brave to do at the time, let me tell you, because what an episode. And like I said, a lot of cartoons did not go in this area, and that's one of the things about Powerpuff Girls is it went to places you never thought it would go. And this was one of the ones that was just kind of like, wow, I can't believe they went there. But Maybe it's because I'm partial to the way they delivered the message and agree with it, but I mean, it was a very solid episode. It's definitely one that's in the memory bank for sure. One of the highlights of that season, because it really points out that villains' motivations can be pretty much anything. And like I said, she was a one-off villain. She never appeared again, so they might have disavowed it as soon as it was out. I mean, maybe they thought it was a mistake. I don't know the story behind it or the thought process behind it now, but I do agree with the message of it initially. I think it's one of their better episodes, and I think it's political without being preachy, which is what you, if you're gonna insist on doing something political, that's what you need to do. That's just how you need to do it. Just don't be preachy. Be straightforward about it. Have a nice cohesive story, and have a good moral to the end, which I think it really did, especially for a kids show. Basically, don't be a hypocrite. So I think it handled that incredibly well. But overall, fantastic series. It had comedy, it had heart, it had great animation. The fight scenes were some of the best I've seen in any animated series. Some of those fights were brutal, but they were action packed wall to wall. A lot of bright colors, a lot of watercolor stuff of the era. Really cool architecture in the show and the buildings. Their house was actually really cool, and the movie shows kind of how their house came to be and how Mojo's lair came to be and that sort of thing. So it's really good for like, I remember being in the movie being excited at the parts where it started to show Townsville started to become the Townsville you recognize from the show, and it was really really cool. It's incredibly well voice acted. Just the stories are, almost every episode is great. I can't really think of episodes I didn't like, although I know there were several. There were a couple of episodes that I remember when they were on air, I just skipped over because I didn't like them. But 100% recommended. Definitely a 9 out of 10. It's not a 10 out of 10 because it's not a perfect show. I would put it at a 10 out of 10. Um, it's definitely in my top 10 favorite cartoons of all time. I'd say it's easily number 6 for sure. But I haven't put a list like that together. So maybe one day I'll have to do that as sort of like a special Toony Talk episode. I don't know. I'm still figuring this whole chunk out. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys think about this series. I think it was a landmark. I think it was revolutionary in many ways. I think it shattered a lot of preconceived expectations that were upon it based on the title. And it just, it was written by some real geniuses. And we haven't gotten much like it since. I mean, Craig McCracken's show after this was Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, which is another one I definitely have to go through that one, but I remember it being fantastic. But I will get to that when I get to that. But for now, this has been Super Koopa with another episode of Toonie Talk, and I will see you guys next time. God bless. Have a good one. Peace.